Hello and welcome to the Godless Moms podcast. Today we are going to be talking about dating, which is something in my distant past, but we'll be talking about it with regards to like when our kids start dating too, as well as dating later on in life. But before we get started, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. I know that a lot of you have been looking for the audio version of this on the podcast apps. I rely on my husband to edit the audio version, and he's a very busy man. He has a full-time job. So he promises me he's going to have it done by this weekend, and I will upload those audio-only versions so you can listen on your podcast apps.
Yes.
And another thing is that Janice is raising money for the second annual conference on religious trauma. And this is an extremely, extremely important conference that provides a safe space for religious trauma survivors, as well as a place for mental health professionals to learn how to treat religious trauma and basically how to be better therapists to atheists in general. This is such a huge, huge, huge thing, and it's helped so many people. Last year it was great. You had Marlene Winnell, you had Daryl
Daryl Ray,
Ray, you
Dan Barker,
had Jeremiah Camera,
Camara,
and lots and
Candace
lots of
Gordon.
amazing people. Dave
Yeah.
Warnock, tons of people. And
Mm-hmm.
this year it's probably going to be even better. So the link is in the description for donating to that. And
Hey,
Janice pays for the whole thing out of her own pocket.
I do.
And I've watched you. I've watched you just like pour money into this thing. So
It's
she's
scary.
not
It's
asking
terrifying.
she's not asking for much to get this thing off the ground. So if you can chip in a couple of dollars, it's really going to help do this amazing, amazing conference. But with that said, how are you doing, Janice?
Well, as you can see, I'm having a good hair day, so I feel pretty good about being being here so far because that's a rare occurrence. Want to let everyone know we're happy to be joining them from the unceded territory of the Sea Elk people in the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia. And yeah, thanks for that shout out about the fundraiser. Also, thought we'd include in the links there about last year's conference, so people can still purchase recordings from last year's conference. And the reason I want people to know about that today is because we are going to be talking about dating and sex and sexuality, including for those of us who are just shedding layers of purity culture toxic bullshit. And that topic was actually addressed really nicely and fairly thoroughly last year by Dr. Daryl Ray. So those you can still purchase those recordings if you want. So I wanted to make sure you have access to that. Oh, and also in the links, I wanted to make sure people know about another project I'm working on, which is called Journey to Understanding Each Other. And this is a project I'm doing with a couple of First Nations mental health colleagues who are part of the Stalo Nation. And we're putting on a series of webinars that are trying to educate non-Indigenous Canadians about how we can become better allies to our Indigenous neighbors in Canada here. And of course, those webinars will be free for anyone who is Indigenous. And actually, we're only charging $15 for people who want to come and learn a little bit more. And the next one we're doing is December 9th. So wanted to put that in there too.
Do you ever sleep?
Not enough. that's for sure. I'm also finishing my book. And yeah, like probably doing about 59 other things, but
I've been finishing my book for like 2 years.
I think I'm down to like the last 10 pages or so. But it's, and then of course I have the
Wow.
joy of getting it edited and trying to find a publisher. I want to have it ready for the conference, but I don't know if that's a pipe dream.
Yeah.
That's my goal. Working towards
It's
it.
a lot. It's a lot of information you have to take in when you're
It
like, it's
is. And
just
for
so
me, it's also
confusing.
very emotional because
Yeah.
I'm writing about my own story in there
Mm-hmm.
and coming out of religion, coming out of that heavy evangelical background. So it's a lot.
Yeah. So speaking of the topic, the dating, you have recently been dating. haven't you?
No, I have. For about the past year and a half, I've been having an online romantic relationship with someone that I met online a couple years ago, and we just became friends. And we had the opportunity to meet in person because we attended a couple of events together in the recovering from religion kind of realm. And so we met in person, but even when we met in person, we were seeing other people, so we weren't interested. We just were connecting as friends. And then, the situation came up where we both were single, and so he was very kind and gentle in recognizing that I had gone through a pretty traumatic breakup not too long before that. And he said, I really want to support you as your friend. How can I help you? And then after a few months of that, he said, if you ever feel like you do want to date again, I'd like you to consider me. And what makes it especially interesting is that he is 22 years my senior. He's
Yeah.
significantly older than me, so he's retired. He's a retired scientist, extremely intelligent, very compassionate. And we did finally have the opportunity to spend 6 weeks together in September. Wow. Wow. It was pretty wonderful. And now he's making plans to move here.
Yeah.
So you can date. I mean, I'm in my 50s and I'm doing it again. And he's in his 70s and he's doing it again. So you're never too old to get back in that dating game.
What was dating like for you growing up with such a religious household and everything like that? Like, what were the rules, etc.?
Yeah. I tell you, the rules for me were different than they were for my brothers because
Yeah.
I had to uh, always be aware of the fact that the shame that it would bring to the family if I ever got pregnant out of wedlock, as the old folks say. So, and sex was also just never discussed in our family. Like, when I became a woman when I was 10 years old, which is too freaking early, I was like, what is going on? What's happening to my body? I don't really appreciate it. So I wouldn't say I was entirely prepared for that. I wasn't really prepared for it. And then, yeah, things just get all of a sudden your body doesn't look the same, and boys in school are treating you different, and people are gawking, and things don't fit right, uh, and then when that's happening, also in the context of a religious home life, it's it feels extra awkward because you see, people dating, peers are dating, and you're aware, from movies and such that there's sex going on outside of marriage, but you're not supposed to feel attraction to anyone, and you're not supposed to even really feel attractive. You're supposed to pretty much be kind of hiding those things, whereas my brothers didn't have restrictions really on what they could do. And then when I was in my late teens and I'd been dating a guy for a couple of years, we finally decided, and he wasn't religious, so I had stepped away from my religion for a few years there. And when I was 19, I decided, okay, we can have sex. Because at 19, you're an adult in British Columbia. And I thought, if anything were to happen, I can take care of myself. I'm an adult. So I waited. We'd already been dating a couple of years. And then when he broke up with me a number of months later, it was all the horrible, toxic training from being raised in a purity culture type environment. I was used, I was dirty, I was worthless, I was that crumpled rose or chewed up gum or whatever horrible thing they teach girls and teenagers that they are if they give up their virginity outside of marriage. And that really sent me into a tailspin. I became quite promiscuous after that and engaged in a lot of activity, which would have been dangerous. It also was a time when HIV was really on the scene. So I remember going quite regularly to get tested for that. It was scary. And then, yeah, just having to cope with my own emotions. And then not too long after that, I had a back to Jesus time. And then I got married and was with my ex-husband for 20 years. And it was shocking to have to enter the dating world again after that.
I imagine.
A lot had changed. The internet changed everything.
I had a different experience growing up. Obviously, it was, my parents talked to me about sex, and they, like, when I was 10, I was allowed to have boy girl parties, and my parents would supervise, like they would be there chaperoning, but it was they were pretty lenient and open and stuff like that, and I was allowed to date when I felt I was ready to date. And I I don't know. They taught me, like, when you're ready, you're ready, as far as like losing your virginity goes, or sex or anything like that. They trusted me to make the right decisions, and I think I did. I mean, I was when the first time for me it was with somebody I was totally head over heels in love with, and he turned out to be a jerk, but at the time it was beautiful and all this stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, it was a little bit different. They were very open. Like, I could say, this is my boyfriend. I could introduce them and they'd be fine with it.
What about birth control?
My parents talked to me about being safe and using condoms, but they never got me on birth control, which is the number one thing that I changed when I became a parent, because I have a daughter. She's now 19, but as soon as she was hanging out with boys, like, she came to live with us when she was 14, and one of the first people that she met and started hanging out with was a boy, and I was like, let's go to the doctor. We're going right now. I am not I'm not a grandma.
Yeah.
And I think she appreciated that. I didn't even ask her. I just said, let's just go. We're going. And she's been on it ever since, and still not a grandma, so
yay.
Worked out all right.
I went through such a transition from being, super religious and really, I dumped a lot of purity culture stuff on my daughters. And then when they're in their teens, I go through this crazy transition and reject religion entirely. And so the kids are watching and kind of wondering what's going on. And then my parenting style changed as well. So when I was religious, I really parented out a place of fear and constant trying to control their environment. I didn't want the devil to get in there. And then when I realized there was no devil, and I actually was in charge of myself, and my kids could be in charge of themselves, with some oversight till they were mature enough, I just eased up so much on the rules and regulations that I had for them. And talking became much easier about sex and about these sorts of things. And when they were in their teens, their middle teens, I also got them started on birth control. And their dad was not real happy with me about it. I think he still was looking at it from the point of, well, you're condoning this, you're encouraging them to run out and have sex. But my viewpoint was years, I do not want to be a grandma. I'm not ready. I wasn't ready at that point. And I didn't want my daughters to be saddled with any kind of fear or guilt or whatever when they did feel like they were ready to be with somebody. I wanted it to be an enjoyable and wonderful experience where they didn't have to worry about getting pregnant. So totally different viewpoint than when they were little and I was trying to control everything.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, like, educating them and talking to them about sex and, so that fully understand the biology and everything that happens and what the dangers are and all this stuff, I think is extremely empowering, especially for girls, and gives them more when you're empowered with knowledge, you have more confidence in yourself in those situations, and it allows girls to set more boundaries and to be more firm with those boundaries because they understand the consequences. They feel empowered with the knowledge that they have, and we found that with our daughter, that she was so shy. She's still very shy and quiet, and but she was absolutely cripplingly shy when she was younger. Like, she would not say a word to people, and she was kind of like, just she was the type of person that just would be like dragged around by everybody, and she just went with the flow and didn't object to anything. And so I always worried about that with her. I always worried, is she going to be in a situation where she's too shy, she's too anxious to say no? And turns out, no, we pumped her full of knowledge, and the understanding that we were there for her, and got her on birth control, and she absolutely sets boundaries now, and it's so awesome to see. So yeah.
And this is something that's, I think, really significant when females are raised in Christian homes. Like, consent was never a word that came up in my house when I was growing up, or even really a word that I used with my daughters. It was very much the idea that, well, number one, Christians are taught that your body is not your own, you belong to God. And then wives are taught they must submit to their husbands. That's a very big part of Christianity. And so, in that sense, withholding sex from your husband would be considered a sin. It would be something that would be very much frowned upon. So, teaching our daughters instead about this idea of consent, and that they own their bodies and they get to decide, who they are going to share their body with. And even the fact that when they are partnered with somebody, they can say no. They can say no at any point. They can change their mind at any point, even if they're having sex with somebody or about to have sex with somebody. So that's empowering and super duper important.
Hold on one sec.
Sure.
I've lost my AirPods. Say something.
I'm still here. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Oh, Courtney, what are we going to do?
It was Tellus. Tellus phoned me, and my AirPods disconnected from my computer and connected to my phone. Okay, say something.
Can you hear me now?
Hold on.
Oh, well, we just got a greeting from someone in Alaska. It's nice to have you here, and hello to the Randys and the Randalls who have joined us.
Hold on one sec.
Okay. Okay, let me know what you'd like to do, pal. Let's see. Should we keep going? I could talk about sex all day and dating. They are such interesting and important and fun topics to cover. But I really want Courtney to be part of the conversation.
I can't get them back. I don't understand what's happening.
Sorry for this technical difficulty. We're having technical difficulties. We should be playing some elevator music. Can you hear me now?
Thanks, Tellus, for calling right in the middle of a podcast.
Oh, look. Shut the Bluetooth off your phone. Will she see that comment? Shut off Bluetooth on your phone. All right.
Huh.
Come on, lady. I think we're almost there.
I don't know.
I think we're not almost there.
Come on.
Oh, this is such a good topic. Come on, Courtney.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave and I'm gonna come right back.
Okay. I'll keep them entertained. Well, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments right now. I am a registered professional counselor in Canada, and I'm also a religious recovery consultant. So I work with people who, a lot of them who have come out of purity culture. I have some clients that are in their 40s and 50s and have actually never been on a date before. So, can you hear us? Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Courtney?
there's a problem with StreamYard.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I know.
Sorry, everybody.
Welcome back.
Thanks, Telus. Thank you for calling right in the middle of the podcast. They call me like 10 times a day.
You're very important, Courtney. Okay. Here we are now, again, talking about one of our favorite topics, which is sex and dating and parenting. So it's good. It's an important topic.
Yes. And I don't know where we left off, but I wanted to mention what rules you might have had or ask you what your rules you might have had for your teens as they were growing up, as far as dating went, and see if they were different from mine.
Well, when my girls were little, it was a lot of, or like preteen even, how they dressed was very, very important. Like they had to be relatively modestly covered. They didn't have to wear head covering and do all the crazy stuff that I did. But I didn't like the idea of them putting their body on display for everybody. And that's how I felt about it. And then and some of the schools also have rules around what kids can wear. Christian schools especially do, not for the boys, but for the girls. Yeah. You can't show your shoulders. You can't wear spaghetti straps. You can't. And even when they got into public school, I think there were some rules around that, which occasionally caused trouble because we don't need to be policing females in that regard. We do need to be instructing boys and young men what's the proper way to treat another human being. And also, we do need to have some frank conversations with our daughters about how easily things can get out of hand and how we want them to feel safe and be in safe situations. But that's not going to happen by just ignoring things and pretending they don't exist. So I did, once the kids were in their teens, and I also was now exploring the dating world, we did talk more about how do you feel about that person? Do you like that person? Is that someone that you really feel strongly about? And consent became more of a topic. But it was also, for me, starting over again, like dating on the internet and using apps and stuff like that. People send you naked pictures unsolicited. I hadn't even seen anybody naked other than my husband for decades. And it was shocking. I was like, why are you sending me this? I kind of, in some ways, when I speak for myself as a woman, to receive an unsolicited photo of anyone's private parts feels on some levels like an assault. I didn't ask for that. I didn't want that. It's not acceptable to send those things to someone without their permission. And for that matter, even trying to date women that you just meet on Twitter or Facebook and just send it in their DMs like, hey, hey, good looking, whatever, that kind of stuff. I'm going, really?
Was
That's
it just
not why I'm
guys?
on here. For
Yeah,
me.
it's always just like, what's wrong with them? I
Yeah.
just like, obviously not all guys are like this, but what's wrong with the ones that are? Who thinks that that's okay? I don't understand. Like nobody is turned on by that. No woman looks at an unsolicited dick pic and is like, oh yeah, you're the one.
No, I think that I think that all women should publicize when that happens.
Yeah,
Let people know this person thought it was acceptable to send me this, which I didn't want to see. We have to start demanding greater accountability from people.
yeah,
And I
I
do remember
agree.
one of my daughters in junior high. She was having a bit of a cry, and I asked her what was going on, and we were talking about her. She had a close friend who was male that she just enjoyed a friendship with, and he had asked her to send him nude pictures of herself, and that was so hurtful to her and made her so sad because she thought it was just a very innocent, really nice friendship, and he changed the tone of it immediately. And then there is such pressure on
Mm-hmm.
kids today in junior high to share nude photos of themselves. That's something that when I was growing up was certainly never a thing. And
Yeah.
kids have to be so careful because once something's out there, it's out there.
Mm-hmm.
And people can be vicious and predatory and use predatory and use those things against them. So we need to talk with our kids about that, even when they're just like tweens.
Yeah.
And talk to them about blowjobs. Talk to them about whatever, anything that might be going on a school bus or in a school bathroom or anything where someone else might try and pressure them or make
Mm-hmm.
them feel like they have to participate.
Yeah, there was that case here in BC, Amanda Todd. Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
That was
Mm-hmm.
so sad. I remember my daughter was quite um, taken with that story.
No, you better
But it
share
was,
about it.
yeah, it was good that she took an interest though, because then she listened to us when we talked to her about stuff like that. Don't share stuff on the internet that, like, even if you think you can trust the person right now, like, I look back on all my ex-boyfriends, I wouldn't trust any of them, like, not a
Well,
one.
and
But at
I
the
mean,
time, I thought for sure I could.
yeah. So, how much wisdom, how much accrued knowledge do you have when you're 12 years old, when you're 15 years old, even when you're 18 years old? Not you barely know enough to come in out of the rain.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, just that you're lacking that experience. And Amanda Todd was her name, I think, and she had been that she had nude photos that someone had asked her for, and then they were used against her, and she was bullied unto death. She ended up taking her own life. Is that the
Yeah.
case? That yeah, it was really just terribly,
She
terribly
was
sad.
like 13 or 14. She was
Mm.
really young. It was really sad.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a really good point that you need to talk to your kids about what they put
Mhm.
out on the internet. We've had that talk already with our son as well, because like as soon as he got a phone with a camera on it, as soon as
Mhm.
he had the ability to um communicate with other people, he was on he plays Minecraft all the time, and he has a friend in
Mhm.
Virginia, like he's making friends in places he's never
Yes.
been and stuff like that. So we have to talk to him about what to look for and stuff like that.
Catfishing, yeah, exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. And let's also make sure that we are talking to our children about porn, because once
Hmm.
kids are, have a phone, and then once if they have unfettered access to the internet on their phone or on their computer, porn is going to come up, and they are going to be curious, and they are going to watch it. And
Hmm.
so, what they need to know is that porn is acting for the most
Hmm.
part. It's not reality. Don't get the mistaken notion in your head that all women like certain things that's done to them. And also, I would say for folks who are coming out of purity culture and they are trying to actually connect with their own sexuality, because there can be a huge disconnect when you're raised in purity culture, because masturbation is viewed as evil and sinful, and your body's natural reactions to stimulus are also viewed with disdain. And so teenagers can get into such a fearful space because they don't want to sin against God and they don't want to upset everyone, that they just like disconnect sexually. That happens
Yeah.
sometimes. So if they're emerging from that horrible cocoon at this point and they're getting back into the real world here, porn is something that sometimes can be helpful for people. And there are ethical porn sites. There are ethical ones where you know that everybody's being paid, everybody's there because it's their job and they want to be there. People aren't being coerced or damaged by participating. So you might want to look into ethical porn sites. But I mean, some people, they don't even know how sex works. They're not even sure how their own body works, let alone another gender. So
Yeah.
this is something we want to normalize, the idea of healthy sex and healthy sexuality, and destigmatize it. Take away any shame around it. And then, of course, KCA Randy says safety has to be a topic, and
Yeah.
that's true as well when we're talking about sex.
He said, my younger son, 23, he'll be 24 in January, went to meet a young lady he met on a dating app. Two guys pulled
Yes,
guns on him and took his wallet, phone, and car.
so
That,
sorry.
yeah, that's awful. And that's something that absolutely can happen. And that can happen like with Facebook Marketplace too, not just dating apps and um Craigslist, all of those things. And
Yes.
I remember because I was like the nerdy kid. Like I was on the computer before anybody had a computer and
Mm.
like constantly. I was I was in chat rooms before anybody knew what a chat room was and like
Ah.
I used to get made fun of a lot by my
Mm.
friends and they would call me a homebody because I wanted to be at home on my computer all the time, but I just loved the computer. And what ended up happening was in my 20s when I was doing a lot of dating, I would meet people online and this was back when that wasn't acceptable. It was not remotely acceptable. And so
Right.
everybody was always like, "Oh, you're going to get yourself murdered" and all of this stuff and I always took precautions even back then. I always made sure that we met in a public place and that I would bring somebody that I trusted with me the first time that I met them or whatever. But that is absolutely important to talk to your kids, especially if they're on dating apps
Mhm.
and meeting people out in the
Let
world that they
somebody
met
know.
online.
Yes,
Yeah.
if you're going out on a date for the first time, leave information with somebody about this is the person's name, this is their profile, here's where I'm meeting them. And
Yeah.
before there were internet dating sites, we had this thing called personals in the newspaper, the inky newspaper that you read
Or
with
video.
with
Do you
your
remember
hands.
video dating?
Oh, yes, yes, video dating. Mm-hmm. Yep, I tell you,
Oh
there've
man.
been adventures in dating. And so people would tell me the same thing when I was doing personals, stuff in my very early 20s and meeting people that I met through the newspaper. Oh, you're going to get killed or whatever. There
Yeah.
were all these fears around it. And again, you sure better be careful. But this
Yeah.
is also true for, say, women who work as realtors and they are
Yeah.
having to go out on their own and show clients properties. Women, we do just have to be careful. And of course, as Randy pointed out there, men also have to be careful. That's just so awful what happened to your son. It's terrible.
Yeah. It's I think it's really important when you meet somebody for a date to meet them in a public place for sure because it's just so dangerous out there. Um Randy also said I had a lady ask me if she would be safe going out with me since I'm an atheist.
Oh
Oh my
my
gosh.
God. It's only babies that aren't safe around
Yeah.
That's so sad that people would even
I know, I
wonder
can't
that.
even
Oh.
believe that people say stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, with our kids, we didn't have any rules per se. We wanted to meet whoever they were dating, but of course, with Abby, she was very quiet and shy. She never offers information. You have to drag it out of her.
Okay.
And it's not because she's hiding anything from us. It's just she's extremely shy. She just doesn't instigate conversation. She doesn't, she's been shy her whole life. And so it was she was hanging out with a boy, that first boy that she was hanging out with when she came to live with us for a while. And that didn't last very long, and they were just friends. And then she met this girl, and they were constantly together. Like, she was at her house 24/7,
Mm.
and we never saw her. And it got to the point where we had to have a talk with her and be like, okay, you have to join us sometimes for dinner. We can't let somebody else's mom feed you all the time, and
Mm.
stuff like that. And then things happened that made me think,
Hmm.
this is not just a friend. And so
Mhm.
I finally asked her, and when I finally asked her, they'd been dating for 11 months.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's how little Abby offers information. Um, but that was kind of awesome in that moment. Um, the fact that she was dating a girl is like, no, we don't have to get her, like, she doesn't have to be on birth control anymore. I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah,
And
there are
generally
benefits.
speaking, women are safer, but this one actually ended up not being the case. Um,
Okay.
and now she has a boyfriend, the same name as my son. So we have a big Joey and a little Joey now in the family.
Oh, yeah. Exploring relationships with our same gender is something that also, for a lot of religious people, completely off the table. Um, and I knew that I was attracted to females probably right from the time I was about 12 years old. But it's not like it was something that I could share with anybody or was even inclined to share with anyone. And I was religious and got married to a religious man. And then wasn't until right around my 40s, and towards the end of the marriage, that I started addressing this, because I was also leaving religion at the time and just feeling like, you know what, I want to see what this is like for me. This is a strong desire that I have. And so giving myself permission then also to expand the eligible dating pool and relationship pool for me,
Yeah.
was a big deal, and was by and large quite enjoyable. So I've had relationships with men and relationships with women, and so my current partner is a guy, and wonderful. I just the gender doesn't seem to matter that much to me, as
Yeah.
I'm more interested in the person. But then to be able to make sure my daughters felt free as well in that
Mhm.
regard, that they could bring anyone home to me to introduce to me or to their dad, and know that we just want them to be happy and safe and enjoying life and living life to the full. And to be able to experience sex without shame is just a marvelous, marvelous thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I think that's like the one of the greatest things that my parents gave to me was the ability to explore my own sexuality without ever feeling an ounce of shame about it.
Mm.
And I always knew that I could go to my parents and talk to them about any questions that I had, and I did.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
Sometimes they would be very embarrassed, and I would too. Like, I would too, because they were embarrassed, but I still knew that, there were times when I needed to know things and I needed
Yeah.
their help with stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
they were there for me. So I think that that's the number one thing that, like, the top thing that I thank them for. Um, I mean, they gave me so much, but it was awesome growing up with that. And also seeing, like, my friends who they didn't understand half of the things that I did, and seeing how they treated sex and dating and all of this stuff. It was very different between the two of us. Now, that's not to say that I didn't make, like, a ton of mistakes and do dumb things, which I totally did, and date dumb people. There's a few people I wish I could cross off my list, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but yeah.
I think it's important as well to discuss things with our kids, quite matter of factly. I mean, let's demystify sex and relationships. It's girls are raised often on a steady stream of Disney fantasy baloney, which we have to make sure they know. And guess what? Religion is also fantasy baloney, especially when it comes to how a marriage is supposed to work. Or people raised in purity culture think that, okay, I've stayed pure my whole life, so our wedding night is just going to be this blissful occasion. But guess what? If you don't know your equipment or their equipment, and they don't know theirs or yours, it's probably not going to be that blissful. It's probably going to be fairly awful. And so trying to cope with that realization. And then some people are in a marriage with a very dissatisfying sex life, and then they end up thinking, oh, I must be frigid, or I just don't like sex, or whatever. And it's actually not that. It's the relationship they have with their partner. That's the problem. And so then people need to be doing their own exploration work with themselves about what's important to them, what they like, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. And then I have folks come to me who are in their 40s and 50s and have never dated, have never been on one date, because they've been so scared of sex because of all the purity bullshit that was forced on them. So it's a hard journey when it's one taking place that late. It feels very awkward. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine that it would. It's I don't know, I just think that, like, sexuality and sex is so deeply a part of who we are, and it's natural and normal and instinctual even on some
Yeah.
levels, and it's something that you're never going to be able to avoid. And I'm a strong believer that when sex is treated like that, the way that it is in, say, like the Catholic Church, and I think this is why we see so much deviance in the Catholic Church, is it comes out in sinister ways when
The
you try
repression.
to, the repression causes it, because it's going to come out. It's a part of who you are. It is a fact of life. It is instinctual. It's something that's going to happen, and you're going to feel it unless you're like asexual, right? And it's it's going to happen. So if you bury it or you try to hide it or try to deny it, it's going to come out in bad ways. And that's
Mm-hmm.
just
And it's such unnecessary baggage. We don't need
yeah.
to. Why not? If we can be raising kids instead with a healthy curiosity about their own bodies and about sex, and we're not saying this is bad and that's bad. Like, let's take moral judgment out of it and actually just teach facts and have a very open discussion type relationship with our kids. Pardon me, it can make a huge difference. But the purity culture is not just a culture, it's an industry. It's an entire industry. They make people write books about it. They sell purity rings. They have purity dances, which they call purity balls, which I think is pretty freaking hilarious. Because when I think of balls, I'm not thinking of purity. So, and all these different things that go along with this purity culture industry. And it's really manipulative and coercive, and a lot of indoctrination and mind control type stuff, telling young people that their bodies are bad and they are bad and their thoughts are sinful and they are sinful. And that, pardon me, but that fucking twists a person.
Yeah.
That's going to screw you up. So it can take time and research and energy and exploration to be able to truly shed that and move into a healthier space with your attitude about your body and sexuality. And then I know lots of people who got married very young because they were religious, and it's their first partner still that they've ever had. Now they've shed their religion, they've really deconstructed or are deconstructing, and now they're looking at themselves and going, am I even straight? Maybe I'm not straight. Like, maybe I'm more attracted to man or my own gender or whatever the thing is. Or maybe monogamy is not working for me anymore. Like, there's all these things that come up when people are deconstructing from religion. And I want anyone who's watching or listening to us to know that it's okay that these things are coming up. It's natural for you to be having these questions if you're married young and only for reasons of religion. There are legitimate issues to be talked about and worked through and considered.
Yeah. And having a child out of wedlock is not the worst thing in the world, because I technically am not married. So we are living in sin over here at the
Ooh,
Godless
living it up.
And we have not been struck by lightning or anything. But Naramata has across the lake.
Well, it was. I'm sure it was a message.
No, we're doing okay over here. It's I don't know. It's some people just are so hung up about marriage and stuff like that, and I don't really understand it. I mean, I don't judge, because whatever is right for you is right for you, but like when I look at some people's weddings and what they pay for it and stuff like that, I'm just like, you could have gone to Fiji, like
Come on.
one night,
Yeah.
one night.
Yeah, and of course, so that also in some ways ties in very much with purity industry and the patriarchy, and hyping up this whole, the wedding industry is so freaking huge, 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 huge. And of course, girls are raised wanting a fairy tale wedding, and so it's important to talk about actually the relationship apart from the wedding, because the wedding is one day, one night.
Yeah. That's true. It says it's cheaper to bounce when it's not working if you aren't attached by paper. That is very true, unless there are children involved. But it is I don't know. It's never been that important to me. I mean, as you can see, I have an engagement ring and it's broken right now, which is why I'm not wearing it. But it's not a diamond, because I would literally murder my husband. I call him my husband despite the fact we're not technically married, but I would literally murder him if he bought me a diamond. I'd be like, you take that back. We will go to Fiji.
You have strong feelings about diamonds.
Well, yeah, I just don't understand putting that kind of money into something that, like, especially if you have kids, like you could put that in a college fund, you could save for retirement, and I mean, I just don't and knowing the history of the diamond ring thing for engagement, it was basically
and
a marketing
blood
ploy.
diamonds
And blood diamonds, and a lot of different gems are like that too, like they're tied to unethical mining and stuff like that. It's just not for me. It's just not for me.
You. Yeah.
No.
But we're not judgmental. So if it is for me and my certain somebody is watching, I would never get mad if you gave me a diamond. That's okay. But look, I see Jeff has a really interesting and important question that you can highlight for us.
Okay. What do you guys think about polyamorous relationships? Janice, you mentioned monogamy, so I thought I would just ask, not talking about running around on the wife.
Okay, thanks for putting that straight.
I had an interesting, it was the HBO show Big Love with Bill Paxton, and it was such a good show. But the thing that made me realize, because prior to that, I was thinking that polygamy or polyamory was all bad, period, end of story, right? After watching that show, I understand that when it's tied to the religion and stuff like that, obviously women are taken advantage of, and it's not a good situation for women in that context. But if you are all fully consenting adults, I have absolutely no, like, it hit me like that. Like, why do I care how many people you're having a relationship with? It doesn't matter to me at all. It's none of my business. It's not for me. It's not for me. But it's none of my business when it's for other people.
And I think there's been a real shift in our culture in the last 10 years, in particular, the last 5 years even, really, around these sorts of things. We hadn't been discussing them as openly before, the idea of polyamory. So polygamy, to me, still has more of a religious tone to it. I think of the FLDS, Bountiful. Polygamy doesn't seem to work out great. It's often lots of wives, lots of kids, one husband who it's pretty hard to make enough of an income to support all these people. And then also, uh, I've heard from kids who've grown up in those situations, and they didn't feel that it was great for them. So we definitely need to keep our kids in mind if we're looking at opening our marriage or moving into a polyamory situation. Um, the spouse that you do already have has to be 100% in favor. And here's something that else I've encountered. A lot of times, one spouse is thinking, hey, this is a great idea. I'm kind of bored. We need to spice things up. The other spouse is now terrified that if they say no, that
lose
spouse is
them.
just going to divorce them. And so it's really easy for resentment to come in. Esther Perel is an author who addresses this quite a bit. And then also, I know there's a book called The Ethical Slut that has been really helpful for a lot of people who are exploring these types of issues. Uh, so you really want to make sure you talk till you're blue in the face about it with your partner. And then also it might help to consult a neutral, like a third party, go to a therapist who actually deals, especially with these sorts of questions in relationships and these sorts of relationships, because things sometimes, I mean, fantasy always sounds fantastic, but in reality, it often falls pretty short. But so yeah, you have to be you and your partner have to have consent, and then if you both decide it's something you want to explore, you're free to do it. But again, if you have kids, you've got to be extra careful because you do not want there to be fallout that impacts your kids if you can help it.
When I lived in Mexico and I was pregnant with Joey, we hung out with this big group of expats from the States, the UK, Canada, Australia, all these different places. And like there was always something going on with them. Like one night it would be like live music at one bar, and or we would go to somebody's pool and have a pool party or something. It was always partying anyway, because that's why people go to Mexico and live there.
Pretty
That's
much.
why we left. um, but it was my baby shower. we were we're having a baby shower at my parents' condo building, and it had a big pool, and there was a bunch of people. All the expats were over, and they're all giving us presents for the baby and stuff like that. And of course, everybody's drinking because that's what you do in Mexico. Again, why we left. And everybody's drinking, and I'm dead sober. So I'm suddenly noticing what's going on as people are like losing control and getting more and more inebriated. And I realized all these people I've been hanging out with are swingers. They're all just
Oh.
getting it on in the pool, and I'm just like, I just never noticed it before, because whenever I was partying with them, I was drinking too, but I couldn't being pregnant anymore, obviously. And so, that's when I realized, wow, they all like swap wives and
and
share, and
and have no shame about it,
no,
and
they were
good
all
for them.
perfectly happy. Yeah, they were
Yeah.
all perfectly happy, and
Mhm.
I didn't
Mhm.
stop hanging out with them. I appreciated the fact that they never like pressured me and my husband into it.
Right.
I don't know if they just didn't want to, or if we gave off no vibes,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
um
That was really respectful of them not to just assume that you
yeah,
were interested in that. I'm all for people, being free
yeah,
sexually to
yeah,
enjoy themselves. We need to keep safety in mind. We need to keep consent in mind. Um, I will say for folks who are just now kind of trying to reconnect with their own sexuality and their own bodies, you might want to look at doing some things like non-sexual things, but that are connecting you to your body. Things like yoga or dancing or running, even art, painting or anything like that, in where you can start relaxing into your body and how it feels to be doing something enjoyable and how your body actually feels. Those are like some gentle things that you can do for yourself while you're recovering from purity culture. And then there are books and podcasts, and be wise with the people that you choose to interact with. Be wise with whom you choose to reveal much about your private self and your private life about. Adults need to be aware of this too, even though we talked about it mainly regarding teens. Adults need to be careful too.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of ex-religious people who it was like as soon as they realized it was all a lie, it was all a myth, they became they couldn't really control themselves. They just kind of became super promiscuous and ended up doing a lot of things that they regretted and didn't treat themselves with the most respect. And that's like, it's such a fine line between being totally free with your sexuality and being and doing things that you're going to regret. So it's a good idea to like slow down after a trauma like that, to slow down and just really take stock of what it is that you want out of life and the things that make you happy and excited and who you're attracted to and all of those things before you start just jumping into stuff like swinging in Mexico.
Right. You can't unring a bell. You cannot unring a bell. So I love that advice. Be thoughtful about it. Try not to be in a rush about it, even though you're feeling like a teenager, again, for the first time in 40 years or however long, 20 years, however long it's been. It's not a race. You don't have to treat it like it's a race. You're worth the time it takes you to figure out and get comfortable and explore things. You're not on anyone else's timetable but your own.
And the other advice that I would give about dating, and this applies to every single person on the planet, don't waste your time with jerks. Like, just don't do it. Don't do it. Like, there's a lot to be said about, in a long-term relationships, you're having problems to communicate and try and work things out and fix them. That's all fair and good, but when somebody's a jerk. When somebody is an abusive person. When somebody's not good for you. In your gut. Don't put up with it. Just get out, move on. Life is short. We're atheists. We know there's no after, and this is it. This is all we get. So enjoy it and make sure you're enjoying it with people who are worth your time.
Ain't no prize for being a martyr.
Yeah.
That is the truth, even though your religion taught you that martyrdom is like the highest calling that there is. And I see it often in with women who stay in very unhealthy marriages, and they're bending over backwards because God hates divorce or whatever the thing is that they're telling themselves from their religious training. No, it's what you said. We've got this one life. It's up to you to make yourself happy.
Yeah. And with that, I think we've come to the end of it. Although we did lose a few minutes there when I was
seriously. Who's running this show? I want my money back.
But yeah, we are going to have the audio only versions up on your podcast apps very, very soon. Hopefully,
but you won't see my hair.
Yeah, you have to tune in live. If you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so that you can be notified. You'll get a little ding on your phone when Janice's hair is live.
Oh, you cheeky thing. I love you. This was fun. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today.
Yep, and we will see you next week.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.